Welcome back to both our U.S. and international audiences. Our top story this morning, Egyptian street protests now enter a fifth day. Egypt has been a longtime American ally in the political power keg known as the Middle East. A toppled Egyptian government would mean a lot of uncertainty and probably some major worries for U.S. diplomats. Let's discuss some of those finer points with former U.S. Ambassador Edward Djerejian. He is currently the director of the Baker Institute at Houston's Rice University, and that's where he joins us live from this morning. Good to see you. Tell us,
Good morning.
Mr. Ambassador, what would you say, what diplomatic challenges does the U.S. relationship with Egypt present to the U.S. government?
Well, first, Egypt is the single most important Arab country in the Middle East, a population of 80 million, a major military power in the region, the country that first has made peace with Israel in the famous 1979 peace agreement. So therefore, Egypt is really the pillar of the Arab-Israeli peace context. It straddles geopolitically the Suez Canal, a major transit point in the world. And culturally, Egypt is one of the most important countries in the whole Muslim world. So this is indeed one of our most important bilateral relationships. We've had a very close relationship with Egypt over the years. We've had our ups and downs. So the challenge to American foreign policy interests in the Middle East is huge. And therefore, whatever happens in Egypt is going to affect us.
Ambassador, this is Jonathan Mann at CNN Center. The United States has given billions of dollars in military aid to Egypt over the years. The Egyptian chief of the military staff was actually in Washington visiting when all of this started. How important now, given the uncertainty about Hosni Mubarak's future, is the conversation between Washington and the Egyptian military?
Well, I think that conversation, Jonathan, is critical because if you look at the scenarios of what might happen in Egypt, and believe me, nobody can predict with any accuracy what's going to happen, but the military is the pillar of the regime. It has, as you know, been the pillar of the regime since Gamal Abdel Nasser did his coup in the 1950s. Every Egyptian president has been a man from the military, including Mubarak. So the military is the mainstay of the regime. Therefore, it is very important that we maintain a very effective relationship with the military. I think that what's going to happen in Egypt, if one can venture to predict, is that either things will unravel in a very chaotic situation, which will be in no one's interest, or Mubarak will try to get the military to, how shall we say it, impose an enforced calm for a period of transition, that the military is the only agency of the Egyptian government that can succeed to do it. We've seen what's happened with the police services. Therefore, to answer your question, those conversations are critical.
Mr. Ambassador, it's Aisha to say here, also at CNN Center in Atlanta. Speaking to your point of the different options that exist in the future for the way this could go, what level of influence does the U.S. really have in all of this? I want to get your assessment of that, because there are those who feel that the U.S. is really caught flat-footed here.
Well, I don't think we've been caught flat-footed as a country. We've had this relationship with Egypt. Democratic and Republican administrations have been urging privately, and not so much publicly, reform, political and economic reforms on the Egyptian regime, as well as other Arab regimes that have autocratic systems. When I was Assistant Secretary of State for the Near East Affairs in 1992, we embarked on a policy of urging political and economic reforms on these Arab countries with the great concern that if radical change came from within these countries, what could the United States do? What good is our military? What good is our Fifth Fleet? We've been involved in urging these countries to impose, if you will, effective reforms, but mostly we've been talking the talk and not walking the walk. We haven't made political and economic reforms an essential part of our bilateral relationship. We haven't been, I believe, assertive enough throughout various American administrations. So no one is caught flat-footed, I think, in Washington. But it's how can we respond to this? I think our influence at this point, this is really in the hands of the Egyptian people now. the various civil society political parties, and Hosni Mubarak. What I would hope for in this circumstance, and it's all about President Mubarak's regime, it's not so much about the government that he had resigned, it's about his regime, is that he can possibly make a speech. It was not last night's speech, but make a speech in which he tells the Egyptian people, I hear you, I hear your frustrations. We are going to have presidential elections later this year. I am going to assure open political participation, opposition parties, all facets of Egyptian society to participate and choose the next leadership of Egypt. That, I think, might have some chance of assuring a peaceful transition. But
Ambassador,
I'm not sure that'll happen.
We've been focusing quite a bit on Egypt this morning, but when you look at the whole region and you talk about what some are calling the Tunisian effect, as we look at what happened in Tunisia, how do we stop this violence and the energized protesters from spreading across the region?
I think our influence is very limited. Once the cat is out of the bag, it's very difficult for the United States to take specific measures that can really stop it. This is really... but
you agree it's critical to stop it?
The ball is now fully in the court of... Oh, yes. I mean, well, what I think is that if the situation in Egypt unravels and there's chaos, and/or radical groups take over the Egyptian government, American foreign policy and national security interests in the whole Middle East will be at risk. Not only the Arab-Israeli context, and I'm sure that the leaders in Israel are watching this with great concern, but every other Arab country, every other Arab leader and regime is watching the events in Egypt with great concern and immediately assessing their own situation. What started in Tunisia and has really caught fire in the most important country in the Arab world has vast implications for the whole Middle East. But let me say one other thing, because I've heard a lot of commentary on the airwaves that the Muslim Brotherhood will come, that it's a choice between the Mubarak regime and the Muslim Brotherhood. We shouldn't jump to that conclusion. I think in any political transition, if it is peaceful, the Muslim Brotherhood will play a role, but we should not jump to the conclusion that it's going to sort of be like Iran, where the mullahs and the ayatollahs take over. Egypt is a very complex society. Jonathan, you know that it has a strong middle class. It has professional associations. You have people like Mohammed Baradei. So we shouldn't jump to the conclusion that it'll be the Muslim Brotherhood that takes over.
All right, we'll leave it there. Former U.S. Ambassador Edward Djerejian, thank you so much for your time this morning.